Practices Safeguard story will be presented to you by Mike Bradley, who is the President and General Manager of Safeguard Security based out of Scottsdale. They are a leading systems integrator in the Southwest and also a PSA owner company. And then joining him to tell his story is John and Ted from HR Group. They are one of PSA's newest business solutions providers, offering a host of HR services. And we've really been impressed with their programming, and that is how this conversation came about, so we can share those stories with you today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity to share our story a little bit. And sometimes it helps to hear from a integrator to another integrator, kind of what changed, helped build the business, what changed in our past that has propelled our success. A few years ago, I was asked to chair a leadership committee within the PSA, and while we did a number of little projects, including helping to build some leadership programs within PSA Tech, one of the things that I was trying to drive home is the importance of best practices, and really that's what this is about. It's I'm a believer in sharing best practices amongst friends. I think that when we do that, we raise the entire industry and we improve the image of our industry by making all of our companies better companies. And so it's our privilege as a company, as Safeguard, to share a little bit of our story on the hiring practices. And so let's get started by reviewing some of our, I'm having a little trouble now making this thing work from my computer. Do I have control of this, Kristen?
You should.
Okay. Don't have control for my keyboard. Let's see. Oh, whoops. Did I just goof?
Nope. There you are. It like popped you off, and now you're back. Can you share your screen? I apologize.
There we go.
There we go.
Now we're running. Okay. So back in, it's about 10 years ago now, we were really at the pinnacle of starting to really grow Safeguard, and our employment at the time, we probably had about 180 employees, but a good deal of those were in our guard and patrol division, and we were truly at the beginning of growing our integration business. And we also have a central station here. We monitor all of our own monitoring accounts, and right today we have about 25 full-time people staffing that group 24/7. And we were noticing an awful high level of turnover within our group, and it was very frustrating. You know, it's expensive, as we know, to hire people. It's expensive then to lose them quickly, and it's disruptive to the business. It's disruptive to your business plan. And it was just not any fun, and a number of us were talking about methods that we might use to improve that, understanding that hiring the right people was important. It was about that time, I think, that Jim Collins came out with his book, Good to Great. We had read the book, Built to Last, and he talked about hiring the right people and putting the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus and putting the right people in the right seats, and all that made a lot of sense to us, but we really didn't know exactly how to do that. And at the time, and frankly still to some extent, our hiring practices were very decentralized. That means with all the divisions, we have about 16 operating divisions within our company. Every manager of a division or branch all did their own hiring, and they did it their own way, with their own style and their own techniques and their own processes, and there really was no central way of doing hiring within a Safeguard organization. Our managers had never really received any formal training. They'd never had an opportunity to get formal instruction on the processes of hiring. You know, there are some that had more experience than others, but for the most part, I think they based their decision making on gut instinct, and it was pretty obvious that that instinct wasn't always right. We had pretty loose recruiting practices. Some people checked references, some people didn't. Some managers did a pretty good job of advertising and describing what they want, so they would bring in the right people. Others would bring in, you know, dozens and dozens of applicants for a single job, of most of which were not qualified, and spent an awful lot of time, a lot of wasted time trying to come up with the right applicants and determine who should be considered for the job. And it was really hurting our morale. One of the problems you have in an organization where hiring practices are loose is that you have morale where the people that are bad have a tendency to stick around, and the good people get frustrated with that. And this is a practice we learned, or a concept we learned from the good to great, that the bad people have a tendency to drive away the good people. And that's not a good situation. So when you start losing really good people that you really trust and value because they're frustrated with the environment they're in and the quality of the people that they're surrounded with, you've got a downward spiral, not an upward climb. And so that's kind of some of what we were experiencing in various divisions, both in our integration business and our central station business. Our accounting was experiencing this, and frankly, we were having some of this experience in our guard and patrol division. And basically, the only assessment that we used to hire somebody was drug screening. And most jobs in our business we polygraph for as well. And that was it. That's the only kind of a tool that we used, other than the actual interviews themselves, to decide who should work for us. So that was what it looked like. And that's the picture in 2002, and it really wasn't a very pretty picture. Here's some of the things that were holding us back the way I look at it. And this is the things that I think is good for any company to assess. How are you doing in these processes? And it was clear to all of us that we really had no uniform process for hiring. We really had to sit down as an organization and said, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. If we're going to spend the time, and we have to, obviously, to hire people, let's do it in a consistent manner so that we get consistent results. That did not exist. Again, the lack of formal training for our managers. We really didn't even understand our culture. I mean, if you asked us what we were looking for in an individual and how they needed to fit within our organization, I think in 2002 we really didn't have a deep understanding of who we were. We didn't really have an understanding of our values and what drove us. And so part of the process that we've gone through the last few years, early on especially, was determining who we are, who we want to be, and what makes sense to us, and what do we want to base our company's growth on, and building those values. And I believe that culture is not something that you design. I don't think you build a culture in a company. I think a culture is a reflection of the values of your company. And so we started working on our values to help improve this. Our leaders didn't even know who they were. Our leaders had never really had an opportunity to sit down and learn about themselves. I never had done it personally. Never had been evaluated. Nobody had ever sat down and done an assessment with me to say, Mike, this is what drives you. This is the way you are. And we didn't have a good understanding of the differences in individuals within our leadership group, and the strengths and the weaknesses, and why did we have some of the struggles with each other. We didn't understand that. We didn't understand why there were some strain from time to time and some conflict between our managers. And we had a lot of ego floating around. Frankly, if you ask most of our managers 10 years ago about their ability to hire, they had a very high ego, and they would say to you, I'm good at this, I know what I'm doing, and I trust my instinct, and I always make great decisions. Well, the proof was in the pudding, and the results were that actually wasn't the case. And frankly, at the time, we had a sense of distrust for any outside resources. And by that I mean, we as a company had a distrust for consultants. We have all had experience in the past in business where we'd hire consultants to come in and talk to us about business planning or long-range planning and that kind of thing. And we do all that work, spend all that money, and then we stick it on the shelf and then realize, that was a waste of time. I don't know why we did that. So we had this distrust of others coming, and we knew what we were. It goes back to number 5. We had egos. We knew what we were doing. There's nobody from the outside that can do it better than we do. So why would we want to listen to anybody else? So that's what was keeping us from improving at the time. So here's when it all started to change. I remember driving to work one day, and as you know, we have a basketball team here, a professional basketball team, the Phoenix Suns in Arizona. Never won a championship at the rate they're going. That may never happen in my lifetime. But they were owned by a pretty significant individual, Jerry Colangelo. Jerry Colangelo is a powerful figure in our area. He's had a tremendous amount of influence in the life of the city of Phoenix, and he's quite a leader himself. And I remember hearing an interview one day where he was being interviewed by somebody in the press, asking him about how they select their players. Most people in the sporting world back 10, 12, 15 years ago selected based on skill. Couldn't you dunk the basketball? Were you powerful? Could you shoot well? If you're a baseball player, can you hit the home runs? What are your averages? On and on it goes. It was basically just skill-based hiring practice, and I think to a great extent that still occurs in most teams. But Jerry Colangelo had a habit, and they had decided as a company from a cultural point of view that it really mattered the kind of individual they brought in. It mattered to them that people fit their mold. And by that I mean they needed to get along with each other. They needed to fit the culture that the organization was trying to develop. Back in those days, there were a lot of teams with all kinds of problems within their players and a lot of drama. The Phoenix Suns never really had that until we hired Charles Barkley, but that's a different story. I think probably they avoided that practice when they hired him. But for the most part, it was a very stable organization. They were great community leaders. They participated in the community, and they wanted to know how they got there. And he said that they did a very intensive process of evaluating any player for the organization through assessments. And they had a significant process of evaluating their personality types and deciding whether they had a good idea what the fit would look like. They knew what they wanted. And they wouldn't hire a basketball player just because they were skilled. They would hire them because they were skilled, first of all, and they also fit the culture of the organization. And that impressed me. But I'm thinking to myself at the time, I could never afford something that a professional basketball team could afford. But fortunately for us, I was out on a board of directors at the time with somebody that had helped to found the HR group. And she and I got in a conversation about this one night after a board meeting. I was sharing with her my frustrations and the frustrations of our managers with hiring practices. And she says, well, I just happened to be involved with an organization that can help you guys. And that's when we were introduced to Ted and John. And we brought Ted and John in to start talking to us about how do we improve our process, how do we become professional. And since I trusted her, I learned to trust them. And one of the things that I think was really key is, as the president of the company, this started with me. I went to our top-level managers as we started going through this process, and I got their buy-in. I got them to agree, hey, it's not going that well. Something needs to change. Let's trust these guys and try it out, and let's see if the processes they want to give us would make a difference in our company. We obviously had a deep desire to change. We were unhappy with the pattern. We didn't want to keep repeating the pattern. And we had to make a financial commitment. And we're pretty cheap guys around here. It's hard to get us, like probably any of your companies, to spend the money. We try to think it through. It's hard to get. It's easier to go out the door. So we finally had to come to that point where we're willing to make a financial commitment because the upside was so good, so high for us. And we made a decision that it needed to be a top-down priority. This is a message I want to get across today, that this is not a decision, I believe, that needs to be made at a middle manager level. I don't believe the decision to have these kind of practices, to engage an organization like HR Group or anybody else, should be made at an HR level, frankly. I think it needs to be made at a C level in your organization. I think it needs to be the CEO of the company, the president of the company saying, this is important, this is something we're going to change, and make it happen, and then oversee over time that it happens. So that's the way it worked for us, and I think it's why it worked so well for us. And at the end of the day, we had a desire to add science to the art. Most people would say that hiring is an art form, and I'm a musician, so I get art. I've got a music degree from Arizona State University. I understand the concept of art and being creative and all that, but the reality is that while you think you're good at being creative and hiring the right people, adding science to back up your theories is important. And what we found when we started doing this assessment process, anyhow, is that our theories were pretty much wrong. we had to kind of do a 180-degree about-face on our thinking. So this is what we did. We added these measurements. We started off in a simple way by adding pre-employment assessments. They are common measurements, and these are the things that we're able to assess today. And there are different tools to do this that we've learned about, and we use different tools with different groups, by the way. We don't do a one-size-fits-all, and HR Group has helped guide us in understanding what tools we ought to use under what circumstances, depending on what kind of an outcome or what kind of a group we're trying to assess. But we do work on things like work ethic and dependability. I like the dependability part. That was described to us early on as, are they even going to show up? How many times have you hired somebody and then the first day of work they don't show up at all, or they come and they work for a day or two and then they're gone? They don't even show up the second or the third day. Unfortunately, that's happened to all of us, And so we want to know what kind of work ethic do these people have? What are they going to be dependable? Are they going to show up when they say they're going to show up? We'd like to evaluate their abilities, and I think that that's the skill-based side of it. We want to know what their strengths and their weaknesses are, especially if they're in positions that are clerical and they have to do clerical skills, math, writing, verbal skills, all of those things are terribly important. We want to know their behaviors. What do they tend toward? Do they like working in groups? Are they tend to be loners? Do they tend to be outgoing, or they tend to be shy? All of those kind of things are measurable. We didn't know that. We like to know what motivates them. If I'm hiring a salesperson, I guess I want to know if they're money motivated. We do the interview, and they say, sure. You say, well, how important is money to you? Well, that's kind of a dumb question. It's important to everybody. But to salespeople, it needs to be really important because we want them highly motivated by the outcomes of commissions. And so we found that we were able to measure that. And of course, we get down to those personal skills we talked about. How good are they at math and science and some very basic things that we can evaluate. So we learned over time that these things can be measured. You don't have to guess at them, and you don't have to take the word of the applicant, and which is what we were doing before, or even through the reference process, taking the word of the references. So here's what we did with our safeguard management. I think that this made a lot of difference in the organization. Rather than go right out and start assessing our staff and start assessing for new employment hiring, I think the first thing we did was we measured all of our managers. And I'll never forget how we did this. We had probably 15 or 16 participants in this. The HR group came in and did a DISC assessment of all of us. It was a management level version of the DISC assessment. And then we every year go off-site and we have a one-day meeting where we just talk about the past, we talk about the future, we do planning, and we invited HR group to come in, and Ted and John presented to us. It took a half a day, and they went over the results with all of us. And I don't know if you've ever seen a DISC. I'll show you one here in a minute. But Ted and John took every one of our results, and they made a big old poster for the wall, and they put all of our results on one poster. And then they revealed it to us. And when they revealed that poster to us, there was this huge glob of red where all of our stars or our dots were up in the very, what they call the high D, the high I area, which were high influencers, we're directors and that kind of thing. And the first thing I think that Ted said to us was, I sure hope there are people elsewhere in your organization that aren't like you, because you're a little scary. We learned that we tend to surround ourselves with people that are like us, and that's not necessarily healthy in an organization. You have to be balanced in an organization, and we were a little unbalanced at the time. And so that was revealing. And then we started to learn about some of the differences between each other. So our managers up front got to see their individual results, and here's the common theme we heard. Wow, this is uncannily accurate. I can't believe how well this assessment nailed who I am. And even though you don't want to admit to some of the results, there are some things on my assessment. I've taken this thing probably 3 or 4 times now over the years. There are some things that I'm not real thrilled about, personally. I'm not completely happy with. But it is what it is. It's that sort of thing. You kind of got to come to grips with who you are. And it's important to come to grips with the people around you and the people you trust and understand who they are. And it defines the relationship a little bit. It gives you some framework to understand why you think the way you think or why they react the way you react. We have some here that are kind of plotters, and they're engineering types who like to think through everything and evaluate everything. There are others like myself who just kind of want to wing it, and that sounds like a good idea. Let's go give it a shot. That's the ADD sort of thing, And so we got a good understanding of each other. So we introduced it to all of us. We went through it together in that off-site meeting, and then we began to develop a deep understanding of who we were. And at the same time, we also went through a process of evaluating the values of our company. What do we value as an organization? Coupling those values like integrity, honesty, things like we respect outside interests. We don't want you just to live here and this be the only thing in your life. We want to respect family and outside interests. We do what we say we're going to do, and we say we're going to do it. That's one of our values. And once we coupled the values with our hiring practices and being able to evaluate people and their ability to fit into those values, I think we started to change the dynamic in the culture of our organization. And it was a nice outcome. At the same time, we also learned about the 1/3 rule. And I'll be honest with you, I probably went a little overboard in the early days on the assessments. I'm a magic bullet kind of guy. If you can show me something that fixes my problems, I'll be all over that. And I have a tendency to be a little narrow-minded and I tend to think, wow, that's the only thing I got to do is just that one thing. It's a magic bullet. What Ted and John helped us understand is there needs to be a balance in the hiring process. And the 1/3 rule is real simple. 1/3 of your evaluation on making your decision to hire should be based upon the references. You need to check the references, and it's probably the one thing we were the worst at doing. We always interview. That's the second item, is you got to do the interview. So you're going to base your decision 1/3 on the references and how they turn out, and you're going to base 1/3 of the decision on the actual interview itself, because you're still going to get a lot out of that. But then you base the other third on the assessment process. And I was going a little overboard thinking the assessments probably ought to be the whole deal, you know, well, we still got to do the interview, but I'm going to really trust the assessments. But the reality is the assessments go first, and it gives us a set of questions very often that we can ask during the interview process to improve the conversation and to get more information from the person we're interviewing. So that's the 1/3 rule. Your decision for hiring is based 1/3 on assessments, 1/3 on references, and 1/3 on the actual interview itself. And once that gave some structure to our managers. It gave them the ability to say, okay, have I done all three of these things, and how do they dovetail together to create an overall decision? Now, the next thing we did after we evaluated our managers is we tackled sales. And I'm a sales guy. That's how I cut my teeth 30 years ago in the industry, was selling. I love sales. I like to do it. I like hiring salespeople. You know, we've got a pretty darn well-heeled compensation plan for our salespeople. We have a lot of them in our organization. So we decided it was time to really get in there and improve our hiring practices. So I got excited about this, and so did our sales managers. And so we started using the DISC assessment, which we use a product from TTI Insights. And as we started evaluating ourselves, and we have some pretty good salespeople in our management group, so that kind of gave us a benchmark of the results there that we could benchmark future hires against. And so we started assessing all of our salespeople against what we thought would be the right kind of an outcome we'd want in the sales result. And what we learned in that is that successful salespeople tend to have what's called a high D and a high I score. I have a really high D, which is a directing type. I actually come in on the assessment as a conducting influencer and a conducting persuader. And so my D is pretty high. I guess it kind of fits for the responsibilities I have. But you have to have a pretty high D, but you want an even higher I, which is influencing. What we were doing is we were hiring salespeople that talked a really good story, and they interviewed really well, and they looked like they had a great background, and but they couldn't sell squat. You know, they seemed like good people, but they didn't close. But you liked them. They were really easy to get along with, and they seemed like the kind of person you'd want. Well, that's not what we want. We want people that are going to get out and do business and get things done. We want persuaders. Well, high influencers, found out, are really one of the keys to hiring the really good people. We can actually measure that. Didn't know that until we started doing this. You can measure whether somebody is a good influencer or not. So we started. We did our existing staff. We did our managers that we thought were pretty good sales people. Our CEO, myself, our sales managers, etc. And then we took our best people that were sales, and we created this benchmark. And then we started mandating that we test every single applicant without fail. And over time, and it really didn't take very long, we realized that we were hiring people that were immediately hitting the ground running and having very quick success and long-term success. And we got along well with them. We liked them. We thought the same way. We were on the same wavelength. We were on the same page, and we were no longer frustrated by the kind of salespeople we had. And there were a few times, well, I'll admit, where we ignored the assessment. And we would look at the results and we'd say, yeah, but I really think this is a really good person. I think they can do this job. I think the assessment's wrong. And in a few cases, we actually went ahead and did the hiring. The interview went well. The references were great, but we didn't pay attention to the other third, which is assessment. And after a few misfires on that, we got our hands slapped a few times and realized, what are we doing to ourselves? We know this works. We need to learn to say no to people that don't fit this mold. And that did change it for us. So we mandated the testing. They did make a big difference, and then we started to learn to trust these assessments. And I think that was the key. When we started to learn to trust is when we started to see the results be expanded to other aspects of our company, other divisions in our company. So here's what a DISC looks like, and there are other assessments, and there are various different measurements. I'm a visual kind of guy, so as a musician, as a creative type, I look at these kind of things, and I get it when I see a chart like this. And this is actually the result of one of our top salespeople. And this is an actual result from one of our people, and this is our benchmark. And if you look down on the bottom of that DISC, you see the relator part and the promoter part. And this is where most of our salespeople that weren't successful were assessing. They were coming in with a star down in the relator promoter part. They're great promoters. If you ask them a question, here's a really key question when hiring a salesperson. What do you consider to be a successful day? And what's a good day for you? A relator promoter will tell you, I got out there and I made 50 calls and I had 3 appointments and I booked another 2 or 3 appointments for next week. That's their answer. That's a good day for them. If you ask a persuading promoter or persuader, like what you have with this particular result, what's a good day for you? And their answer is, I closed 2 or 3 projects. I closed is the key word. That's the definition of a salesperson. And we found it might seem like a minor change in the way they behave and the way they assess, but it makes all the difference in the world and the results. Today, we do not hire key salespeople for any sales position unless they fall within that category of the persuader conductor, persuader promoter. It's right in the center there. And we've found that when we ignore that, we end up regretting it. Now, if you were to look at that at the same time, you look at the other side, it says coordinator and analyzer. If I'm hiring a designer, and we have designers in our company, I do not want a persuading promoter over there for a design engineering position. I need somebody that's very logical, somebody that thinks things through, that asks a lot of questions, that is willing to take the time to make the design right. So what I want is somebody that's more of an analyzer, maybe an implementer. Our project managers, they tend to score up at the top of this chart because we now measure them as well. So they're implementers and conductors, they're leaders, they get out there and make things happen. Our accounting positions, they have to be on the exact opposite of the salespeople. They're the coordinators, they're the coordinator analyzers. Our customer support group, they're going to be the supporters and the relators. They're the people that you want to talk to, you feel good about the conversation when you hang up, feel like you got your needs met, etc. So we have people all over our company that fall all over this wheel. And you ever wonder why salespeople can't get along with accounting? It's because they're absolute 180-degree polar opposites of each other. And so when I learned that, I started celebrating the differences and started celebrating the friction and accepting the friction rather than trying to fix the friction. Spent all of our time in the past trying to get our salespeople to get along with our accounting people. So what we did is we just put in processes that accommodated, kind of buffered between the two groups, understanding they're never going to think the same way. They react differently, they have different things that motivate them. And so we learned to celebrate rather than keep fighting these differences between people. So that's what the DISC has helped us to do. It's helped us to understand our organization. It's helped us to understand the different personality, behavioral motivator types within our organization and put the right people in the right seats on the bus. So that's a real key thing for us. So there's some other things that we've used this for. We use it in hiring our key managers. We would always assess for that. We use it for hiring our project managers. And we evaluate underperformers. Now that was really more important in the early days of this. You know, we needed to understand why some people were frustrating us or not succeeding. So when we started doing the DISC analysis, we started realizing we had the wrong people in the wrong seats of the bus. In a couple of cases, those people are still with us. They're just not in the same position anymore. It allowed us to adjust them to a position where they would be happier and they would give the company the results they needed. So we used it to evaluate underperformers. I'll tell you a real quick story. Yesterday I was in Kansas City, and we're flying back. We're in the airport, and we were at a best practices meeting with a group of integrators like ourselves, and my sales manager for our integration group and I were having a conversation about our vertical markets and trying to go horizontal within our vertical markets. In other words, understand different product types within certain vertical markets, and maybe we need to have more than one salesperson calling on, say, the hospital industry, instead of having one right now who tends to concentrate on just one aspect, like nurse call systems. We needed somebody that could also do security, et cetera, and have them work as a team. And we were talking about who might do that. Do we have anybody in our organization we might want to move into that position? And he immediately said, yeah, I got just the guy. And he named that person. I said, well, he's one of our designers. He said, yeah, but I think he'd be great. I said, Mike, how long have we been doing this together? I mean, he and I worked together for 25 years, and we've been working on these assessments now for 10 years. And I said, have you ever done a disc analysis on him? Well, no. I said, we're not having this conversation and going any further with this conversation until you do an analysis on him. You can come back to me and prove to me that he deserves to be a salesperson. Because the last thing we're going to do is put an engineer in a sales position who is truly an engineer. It will drive all of us nuts. He's going to fail. You're going to end up losing him. Why would we do that? This is after all these years of keep pounding it. And I tell you this story to reiterate the importance of somebody at a C-level buying into this thing and making sure that it always happens. Without my influence throughout this company, I do not believe that this would be practiced on an ongoing, regular basis. I do not believe without my influence and my insistence that we would have had the success that we've had. I think it has to be a top-down influence within your organization. So we've gone a little further with this. When we did the DISC analysis, it was primarily for high-level positions and managers and sales, et cetera. But then Ted and John introduced us to another product. This is the product that we use with our central station. We also use it with our clerical positions, accounting. We use it with our coordinators. These are the people that do the dispatching of service technicians and coordinate our service effort and coordinate our installation crew. These are people that live in the office, and they do the same thing day after day after day after day and have a lot of influence with our customers. And so we found the forecaster test by Mercer Systems, and it measures abilities and behaviors. And what we do with that is we go in, and Ted and John will ask, okay, give us your best 2 or 3 people, actually 3 or 4, and these are the people you want to clone. These are the people that you know already do a great job. If you could clone them, you would do it in a heartbeat. So we want to measure them with this assessment. Then they take those 3 or 4 assessments and they send it off to Mercer himself, who sits there and evaluates these and puts them into a single benchmark. So, and they're not all identical. The results are not all identical, but they combine them into an ideal benchmark. And the benchmark gives you a range for each particular category. For instance, do they like to work in a group or do they like to work as an individual? That might be important. If you're working at our central station, you better like to work in a group, because that group works together, they talk together, they dispatch together, they help each other. So you have to be somebody that enjoys working in a group format, not sitting in the back room in a corner all by yourself. So we actually can measure that. We benchmark that. And then when we test applicants against that benchmark, we can say, hey, you don't really fit this particular area in our benchmark and our ideal. We're going to ask a lot of questions, or we may decide that they're just not the person for us if we have too many misses on different categories. So we assess the individuals we'd like to clone. We then create a benchmark, and then all applicants in the future are assessed against this. We probably go through more of these assessments than any other single assessment in our organization. We buy them in blocks of 50 at a time. And then our managers who use this have login capability. They can set up these assessments. They're done online. We can do them here in the office if we're doing an interview with somebody, or we can send them home and they can do it at home. They need to do it in a quiet time when they can dedicate about 20 minutes to the process. When they're done with the assessment, we get an email saying it's ready to view, and we can take a look at it. And then what we've learned and what Ted and John have taught us to do is to interview based on the results of the assessment. The assessments actually give you questions you can ask. They're designed in such a way that that it talks about this person in this position and how they're going to be successful and what you need to know about them or what you might have to coach them on. And the nice thing is we don't just use these assessments to hire. We also use them to coach. We use them to set up onboarding processes and decide what kind of training they're going to need, what kind of coaching do we need, because not everybody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And so you've got weaknesses. Well, those weaknesses need to be coached around. So these assessments give an opportunity not just to hire the right people, but then to coach them into success in the position. So we've learned to interview using the assessments, and then we primarily apply this particular type of assessment, the forecaster assessments, to our hourly positions. And I'd say that we probably are using somewhere around 75 to 125 of these assessments a year now because of some of the growth of our business, and we still have some turnover naturally as a result of the difficulty of some of these positions like the central station where we do our monitoring. So what's it like today? Today, we no longer have the turnover that we used to have, and we measure this. It is way, way down. We were having turnover in excess of 100% a year in our central station. Today, our turnover is somewhere in the 20 to 30%. It still happens. People are going to leave. They're not going to stay forever, and sometimes, they'll decide this really wasn't for me, and they'll want to go do something else. Or sometimes we help them make that decision because it turns out, despite the assessment, despite the interviews, we might have made a mistake. So we have some turnover, but it's way down. We put a lot of effort into training our new managers. Ted and John will come in and sit down with us and work with our new managers on how to use these assessments, how to glean insights from them, how to review them, how to even issue them, and what to tell our applicants. And when our applicants come in, they know they're going to be going through this process. It's created a culture at Safeguard that attracts and keeps the best people. And if I had one thing that's just golden, that's it. We have attracted some really phenomenal people. And as a result of creating a culture of people that matter and want to get results and that care, we're starting to attract young people to our organization. We're getting old. Some of us that have been around a long time, we're in our 50s and we're getting in our 60s, and that's who's running this business. But when you look around our office, you wouldn't know that because we're surrounded with a ton of young people. And I ask myself, why do these people want to come to work for a security company? We're not a glamorous industry. We're not a glamorous business. But it's because they like the culture here, and they've learned that if they work for Safeguard, they're going to be valued, and they're going to be surrounded with people that are like-minded, and that we've taken a good deal of care to hire. So we have better morale now as a result. Instead of the bad people driving away the good people, today I can honestly tell you the good people drive away the bad people. If you're bad, if you're don't deserve to be in your position, I'm not the one that has to make that decision. The other people in this company will drive you away. They'll make it miserable for you, and because they're not about to let this go the other direction like it used to be, 10 years ago or more. We don't make that many mistakes. We still make mistakes. We're not perfect. But we used to make a lot of hiring mistakes. Today we have analytical, scientific ways of helping avoid making mistakes. You still have to do the process. You still have to apply the 1/3 rule. But I'd say today it's a very different company. And I'll be honest with you, in the last 10 years, we've tripled the size of this business, revenue-wise. Now, it's not just because of this. We've been in the right place. We've done a lot of other things right. But I can assure you we could have never done a good job of taking good care of our customers in this growth had we not learned to get the right people on the bus and create a decent culture that was good for our people. I have a belief about people. That is, we talk about what do you want to do this year? I ask other companies, what is it you want to put effort into this next year? And they'll say, well, we want to do a lot of training, and we want to invest in our people, and we want to make sure we're going to put a lot of effort into our customers. We really want to make sure our customers feel valued. Well, if you want to make sure your customers feel valued, make sure you take care of your people first. And you take care of your people by putting them in positions with other people that do a great job as well. Because when you take good care of your people, they automatically take good care of your customers. So that's really the Safeguard story. We found the right partner. We use these tools. Our managers have experienced it. They understand it. I kind of have to keep on top of it, though. I've learned that if I back off and I don't ask the questions and I don't keep an eye on the hiring practices, we tend to go back to the old ways and we get a little lazy because this takes a little effort. It does take some work. The processes are not hard, but they do take thought, and you have to be diligent. Fanatical discipline, I think, would be the way to describe it. We have to be very disciplined about doing this. It predicts success for us. Extremely accurate. And it's cost effective. When I had that fear 10 years ago after hearing Jared Colangelo talk about the Phoenix Suns, I thought we couldn't afford this. I'm thinking this thing's got to cost thousands of dollars per person to evaluate them. Turns out it's $100, $150, and if you can avoid making the wrong mistake, that's like a no-brainer. It's the sort of thing of why wouldn't you spend a little bit of money to avoid making some significant mistakes when it comes to people. So I believe it's cost effective. And it's continued to remain a top-down priority with our organization. When we put together a list of people we wanted to hear this webinar and participate in this, we put together a C-level list. If you were invited to participate in this webinar, it's because you're at a C-level position in your organization. I believe that's where it's got to start. So at this point, I'm done with the story. I'll turn it over to Ted and John and let them offer a couple of insights.
This is Ted. Just to thank you very much. It's a terrific story. As Mike said, we've been working together for over 10 years. John and I love what we're doing. We're part of that age bracket that Mike referred to. We're no longer in our 20s or 30s. We're doing what we do because we really like to see the results. Sure, there's an income involved, but also there's tremendous satisfaction in helping companies reposition themselves and improve their performance. A little bit of history of how we became business solutions providers. Through an introduction, through Mike, we met Bill Bozeman, and John and I spent the better part of a morning with him sometime fourth quarter of last year, talking about what he felt were critically important performance areas for the integrators, for the owners and the members of PSA Security Network. And it came down really to three areas that he felt many of the companies could benefit from. The first is recruiting and selection, and that's what Mike has just been talking about. The second is in leadership development, and if you've been following the things that are being sent out by PSA, there's an awful lot of very good information coming out from Bill regarding leadership development. And then lastly is compensation programs. So although there are other things that HR Group can and actually has begun to provide to the PSA family, those are the three that we are focusing on primarily: recruiting and selection, leadership development, and compensation programs. And to be very honest with you, once you get into this, as Mike was saying in a way, the services that can help virtually any company of any size are like a big bowl of M&Ms in the middle of the table. You try one, and you figure, well, I'm not going to eat another one, and then you try a second one and a third one. And there are a lot of things that can be provided by those outsiders that Safeguard at one time kind of rejected to give objective insights into the organization. Again, our goal is to help. Our goal is to improve the performance of companies. So while we selected those three items based on our discussions with Bill, it was kind of interesting that our initial engagement really wasn't with a owner or a member of PSA. We actually started working with the PSA leadership team, and I'll let John describe how we got introduced to them and what all we've done with the PSA staff.
Yes. Well, Bill Bozeman, I think after meeting us and talking to people like Mike Bradley, he kind of caught his attention too, and in terms of the PSA corporate staff itself. So we've been working with Bill and the other managers there to help them in using these assessments in their hiring process. And this isn't any secret because Bill did a separate webinar recently on finding good employees, and he referenced using the assessments in a process where they're currently recruiting for two executives to join the PSA staff. So we're working with them. We just, as Ted mentioned, we just signed on really as a business solutions provider for PSA at the end of last year, and since that time, and currently we're working with about 8 different companies, 8 different PSA owners and customers as HR group clients. We have a number of other contacts that we've made. We will be presenting at 3 different sessions at the PSA Tech conference and making contacts there. So our goal is to expand that list and continue to add value to the integrators in the same way that we've done here at Safeguard. That's our goal.
Okay. Krista, we're going to turn it back over to you. Assuming you're still there.
No mic detected.
That's been on the whole time. I pray that this.
All right. Well, the question then is if there's any.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you are.
I apologize for the technical difficulties. I did actually have a couple of questions come through, so I wanted to ask those now and then do a quick little wrap-up. One of those questions is, if I do want to start this process and get involved with HR Group and move forward, how do I do so?
Well, the process is, this is John, process is really pretty easy, and we prefer, Mike mentioned this several times, that it really needs to come from the top. So our preference is that our discussion initially be with the CEO, the COO of the organization, so we get that top-down acceptance and buy-in. I'll just give a real quick case study. This happened just 2 weeks ago. A PSA customer called us, the CEO called. Actually, I took the call. We had about a 20-minute conversation and discussing what their needs are, finding out more about their company, and made a decision on which products would be best suited. The next day, we had a telephone demo of the forecaster test because that's what was determined to best fit their needs. By the end of that week, literally, because they were in a hurry, they were in the process of they wanting to assess and hire some candidates for their central station. By the end of the week, they were testing candidates. And we've established or are in the process of establishing the benchmark for their job. So it can go very quickly, but again, it's best if it starts with that initial discussion with the CEO or COO.
Okay, perfect. And then if we move forward with using one of your tests, how will we know if we interpret the test results correctly?
That's a good question. Mike alluded to it. In the very beginning, this is Ted, either John or myself or both, depending on the engagement, will be involved with making sure that the users have a clear understanding of the value and the insights that are contained in the various tests or assessments. Matter of fact, I dealt with a new PSA member just yesterday and was just helping them to interpret the results. We don't leave people out there because it's dangerous. We don't leave people out there who don't have a clear understanding of how to read the results because that can be almost worse than not having a test at all. As Mike said, after a while of using these things, our clients become comfortable with them, and then it backs down to the occasional question, a very unusual report, or somebody who they really want to hire but the assessment results don't seem to be quite right. What questions can we ask? What else can we look at? So I guess the bottom line in this area is we don't just let you get the test results. We make sure, test by test, assessment by assessment, that you understand to the greatest possible extent what is in there. And then, as I say, over a period of time, the clients tend to take it off on their own, and we're only called occasionally. But all of that training, all of those interpretive meetings, those are, kind of on us. We want you to use the assessments, obviously, but we want you to use them carefully. So there's no charge for the training or interpretation.
And that leads well into the next question, which is, If I use the test, can I make my final selections based on the assessment results?
No. This is Ted again. Mike talked about the 1/3 rule. We do have people who slip into that belief that, you know, it's as easy as A, B, C. If C doesn't come out right, we don't want to hire this person. That's always a very dangerous thing to do. You really have to follow the value of the references. The best predictor of future performance is what somebody has done in the past. And you can get good reference material. It's just wrong when people say, oh, you can't get a reference anymore. You usually can. And the reference person's insights are very valuable, as the quality of the interview, and we help people structure interviews. So if your organization or an organization is not comfortable in interviewing styles, what questions to use, how to phrase them, when to do it, who should be involved, we can assist with that. And then the last area, obviously, is the test results or the assessment results. The 1/3 rule is critically important.
Great. Okay, just to do some housekeeping and wrap up, the reason, once again, why we are offering this presentation through Mike, thank you so much for giving us your perspective and your story, and with HR Group, is because PSA offers business solutions. And business solutions are just a suite of pre-screened products that help make our owners and customers more competitive in their market. So they're all easy to implement, pre-screened, and usually PSA has used and been involved with the programs extensively and is very pleased with what we see, which is absolutely the case with HR Group. So if you need any assistance in recruiting and selecting top talent, leadership development, your compensation program, or any other HR expertise and assistance, HR Group is who we would recommend to you. But if you have additional questions just on business solutions or PSA on the whole, you can contact me at solutions@psasecurity.com or by phone at 303-450-3461. And you can find all of our solutions offerings, including more detail about HR Group, at buypsa.com/solutions. And with that, I don't see any more questions. So once again, thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you, Mike and HR Group, for giving us your story. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.